March 12, 2026. We are in the 5th year and on day 17 since the start of the full-scale invasion. Welcome, I greet you to the Situation Report. In today's report, we will look at some attacks on Russian oil infrastructure, especially on pipelines. It's definitely going to be very interesting. We'll also take a look at the situation at the front. We will also take a look at why the United States and Israel are able to establish air superiority in Iran after just a few days. But Russia, after 4 years of war, still hasn't managed to claim air superiority in Ukraine, even though the Ukrainian Air Force was actually smaller and definitely not as powerful in combat. But before that, as you can probably already see in the timeline, today's report is quite short. That's due to the current state of available information. As I said, when it comes to the Middle East, specifically Iran and the Strait of Hormuz, there are many new reports. I could summarize all of them in a separate Iran situation report, and I will probably do that tomorrow. That will be released sometime tomorrow. Definitely not today. However, a lot of Ukraine news is currently being overlooked again, which is why today's report won't reach 10 minutes. The most important oil hub in Tikhoretsk in the Russian region of Krasnodar was hit hard this morning and is currently on fire. The terminal is considered a central hub for oil in southern Russia. From there, crude oil is transported further to ports such as Novorossiysk and Vapsa. These are important export points for Russian energy. In recent months, there have been repeated airstrikes against oil terminals and loading units at the port. Most of the time, it was done by sea drones that were able to destroy pumping stations, or by drone attacks from the air. But now an important transshipment point has been hit, which will visibly affect deliveries to the two ports. Since Starlink was deactivated for Russian forces in Ukraine, internet traffic has dropped by about 75%, according to data from the network analysis company Scantic. This suggests that a large portion of the active terminals were actually being used by the Russian side before. According to estimates, up to 3/4 of all Starlink terminals in the area of operations may have been in Russian hands and only 1/4 in Ukrainian hands. The sharp decline in data traffic also shows how much Russian units, especially for communication, reconnaissance, and drone operations, had become dependent on such satellite connections. Even though these belong to a company abroad, and even in a company in a country that Russia itself recognizes or views as a rival or enemy country, and publicly refers to it as such, even on its own state television. That would be about the same as if the Bundeswehr or Germany were to absolutely oppose Austria, but at the same time manage satellite systems and almost all of their communication through Austrian systems. But let's take a look at the front. The situation to the west of Huljapole. Once again, for your reference, Huljapole is located here. The Russians have been able to capture about, this area here over the past 1.5 to 2 months. And here, the situation is shown as significantly more complex than many other maps depict it. Russian propaganda-affiliated maps often show the front as a simple line, while pro-Ukrainian representations often hide the situation behind a large gray zone. In fact, at the beginning of 2026, a Ukrainian blocking position was established there, stretching for more than 10 kilometers in length and about 1.5 kilometers in width. This position runs here in the Huljapolska area, from the northern part of Stadiznica to the western outskirts of Huljapole. The position starts somewhere here, stretches over this area, across this place, and then goes here towards Huljapole. Half of this blockade is already under Russian control. But here there is another blocking position, namely here between the two hills. Because if we look at the Russian attack route, it is partially limited. There is a body of water running through here, specifically a river. Up here, there is a larger Ukrainian defensive line, as well as another river running through here. That means they are in a kind of funnel through which they attack and can hardly break out. But if we now look at how they attack, we can also see various Ukrainian positions right here in the middle of this funnel, which are then pushing forward. The two hills, 154 and 133, have of course been occupied by the Ukrainians. Here, especially Hill 133, which has been very well fortified, similar to the hill we looked at recently in the area of the Ukrainian counteroffensive. And that's the case here with Hill 134, which was heavily fortified by the Russians. It's similar here with Hill 133 only on the Ukrainian side. And this position allows Ukrainian reconnaissance and sabotage groups to regularly advance up to the western or northwestern ramp areas of Huljapole. The Russian 5th Army, the Army of Group Vostok, has been trying to break through this spearhead position since February 2026. Initially, an attack was carried out in the area around Salis-Nice, the 114th Regiment of the 127th, which was deployed there. Motorized Rifle Division was able to temporarily capture a large part of the village in mid-February, but was pushed back after a counterattack by units of the 225th. Assault Regiment back to the level of the eastern positions. Currently, Russian forces are trying to cut off the Ukrainian position at its base, especially in the area of Hill 133 west of the village. From the north, units of the 60th Motorized Rifle Brigade are attacking basically from here, trying to bypass the hill, and they are being supported by elements of the 39th. Motorized Rifle Brigade, which is located here, supports them, having previously been redeployed from the Pokrovsky area. At the same time, reconnaissance and sabotage groups of the 114th Regiment are trying to bypass Hill 133 to the south, specifically via the southeast. So it's getting quite tense here, and it could turn into a war of attrition where the Russians won't be able to advance any further, since the Ukrainians have fortified this area well and also hold the high ground advantage. A Russian military channel has addressed the question of why, after more than 4 years of war, Russia still hasn't achieved air superiority over Ukraine. The Russian Air Force does have modern systems, such as the Su-34 bombers with Universal Module for Planning and Correction glide bombs, the Su-35S fighters with R-37M long-range missiles, or the K-52 attack helicopters with many guided weapons. These continue to carry out missions and attack targets, especially on the southern front. The crucial limitation, however, is that Russian aircraft can operate almost exclusively over their own territory or areas controlled by Russia, often even several dozen kilometers away, which is why the range of the glide bombs with Universal Module for Planning and Correction kits is constantly being increased. The goal is to be able to hit targets on the Ukrainian side without the bombers themselves coming within range of Ukrainian air defenses. Attacks deep in the rear of Ukraine, on the other hand, remain very risky for Russian aircraft. In practice, according to a commentary, this has led to the air war developing similarly on both sides. Flights over their territory, glide bomb attacks on front lines, and drone defense in rear areas. And that's a stark contrast to the current war in the Middle East. There, American and Israeli aircraft and drones, after destroying the enemy's air defenses, would have had virtually free reign, able to fly hundreds of kilometers into the interior and strike targets directly over the target area. However, the author says Russia has not managed to consistently suppress the enemy's air defenses this way. He sees the reasons for this mainly in the organizational problem of insufficient reconnaissance and the lack of specialized Air Force capabilities. An example of this is the Starokostiantynov airfield in western Ukraine. Although it has been regularly attacked with missiles and drones for years, Ukrainian Su-24 bombers continue to operate there, capable of deploying cruise missiles against targets deep inside Russian territory. Repeated Russian attacks on Ukrainian energy infrastructure have also failed to achieve a permanent shutdown, despite significant resources being used. In the author's opinion, the situation is unlikely to change. As long as the Russian Air Force continues to act mainly as a support force, it will not be able to gain air superiority or carry out air operations. Thank you to all subscribers, channel members, and the Algae crew. Please subscribe, like, and comment. Special thanks to Lieutenant Colonel Renee Kessler, Tadig Pretium, and Mayor Hofer.